Chaos Monkeys by Antonio Garcia Martinez. Picture this. You've just bet everything on yourself. You walked away from a cushy Wall Street paycheck, packed your bags, and dove headfirst into the glittering chaos of Silicon Valley. After learning the ropes, you decide to go for broke. You gather a small crew of brilliant engineers, quit your comfortable job, and pour everything you've got into building your own company. You make it into Y Combinator, the most prestigious startup program on the planet. You're grinding 16-hour days from a cramped, run-down apartment, surviving on cheap coffee and pure ambition. And it's actually working. You've built something real. You've got momentum. Investors are circling with big checks. You're this close to everything you've ever wanted. Then your phone rings. It's your lawyer. Your old boss, a powerful, vindictive guy running a company worth hundreds of millions, just filed a lawsuit against you. Personally. He's going after your co-founders, too, accusing you of stealing trade secrets, trying to crush your baby company before it can even crawl. You've got $2,000 to your name. The law firm coming after you, the most expensive and ruthless in all of Silicon Valley. Right then you realize this game isn't about innovation and cool ideas. It's a street fight, a war, and you're completely, terrifyingly outgunned. What would you do? This isn't some made-up scenario. This is just one wild chapter from Antonio Garcia Martinez's explosive memoir, Chaos Monkeys, Obscene Fortune and Random Failure in Silicon Valley. This book is rare, a brutally honest, no-filter peek behind the curtain of the tech industry, written by someone who burned every bridge on his way out. Martinez isn't your typical tech bro. He was a physics PhD student who bailed to become a quantitative strategist at Goldman Sachs during the 2008 financial meltdown. Then he ditched Wall Street for Silicon Valley, founded a startup that Twitter acquired, and landed at Facebook as a product manager during the crazy years before its historic IPO. He saw everything from the inside. This isn't some polite business book. It's raw, hilarious, and often shocking. The real story of what it takes to succeed in a world where brilliant, ambitious people battle each other for money, power, and ego. Today, we're diving into his journey. By the end, you'll understand Silicon Valley's unwritten rules. You'll see how giants like Facebook and Google really think, fight, and win. And most importantly, you'll discover the mindset you need to navigate a world run by chaos monkeys, and maybe even become one yourself. Our story doesn't start in Silicon Valley's sunny campuses, but in the cold, frantic heart of Wall Street, inside Goldman Sachs headquarters. To understand Antonio Garcia Martinez, you need to understand where he came from. He describes his job there as being one of the quote, bookie undertakers, a pricing quant for credit derivatives. Basically, his team built complex math models to bet on whether massive corporations would live or die. It was a world, he says, where your entire human worth gets reduced to one number, your year-end bonus. A place of extreme intelligence and even more extreme absurdity. Martinez tells this story about a White Castle burger-eating contest right on the trading floor, where traders managing billion-dollar portfolios would suddenly stop everything to place high-stakes bets on which young analyst could swallow the most greasy sliders without puking. The winner? A guy named Rich Rosenblum, who later became a managing director at the firm. As Martinez dryly puts it, capitalism rewards true talent. This culture of glorified greed was thrilling, but it was also a golden cage. On Wall Street, people check in but rarely check out, because the money becomes a leash. But Martinez noticed something else happening. He watched technology's unstoppable march. Goldman had bought an old-school brokerage that employed hundreds of traders in colored jackets, shouting across trading pits. Within a few years, those hundreds of traders vanished, replaced by 2 traders, 20 quants, and hundreds of lightning-fast computers. Martinez realized something profound. In the future, there will be 2 types of jobs: people who tell computers what to do, and people who get told by computers what to do. Wall Street was just the first industry to feel this shift. The next, he sensed, would be internet advertising. So on a whim, spotting an ad for a research scientist at a Silicon Valley startup called Adchemy. He sent his resume and soon found himself on a plane to California. He was escaping Wall Street's sinking ship, which was crumbling under the 2008 crisis, for what he hoped would be a lifeboat. But as he'd soon learn, some lifeboats have leaks too. Adchemy looked promising on the surface, a company using math for advertising, but Martinez quickly discovered it was a perfect case study in how startups can fail while making lots of money. He gives us a brilliant checklist for spotting a sinking ship, lessons learned through painful experience. First, never trust the survivor of a massacre. When he joined, none of the original founders or early employees remained except the CEO, Martinez. Giant red flag. A startup that purges its founding team is trouble. Second, beware of startups making easy money in businesses that aren't their core product. Adchemy was pulling in millions monthly, but not from selling software. They were making it in a sketchy corner of the internet called lead generation, basically selling lists of potential customers for mortgage refinancing and online degrees. This cash flow acted like a trust fund for a drug addict. It didn't solve the core problem, just postponed the inevitable crash while making it more painful. It let the company ignore that their actual product had no real paying clients. Third, and this one's subtle, beware of companies whose employee retention strategy is cultivating Stockholm Syndrome. Despite the CEO's legendary tantrums and mismanagement, many employees felt bizarre loyalty, even buying company stock that would eventually become worthless. They'd fallen for their captor. Seeing the writing on the wall, Martinez knew he had to escape. But this time, he wouldn't jump to someone else's ship. He'd build his own. He teamed up with two of Adchemy's brightest engineers, Matthew McEachin, the company's longest-serving and most productive programmer, and Argyris Zimnis, a brilliant mind from Stanford's Artificial Intelligence Lab. The catalyst for their escape was an essay by Paul Graham. Now, Paul Graham is a Silicon Valley legend. He founded one of the first internet companies, ViaWeb, sold it to Yahoo for millions, then used that money to create an incredible institution called Y Combinator. Y Combinator is like boot camp for startups. Twice yearly, it takes a few dozen teams of hopeful founders, gives them a tiny amount of money, and puts them through a 3-month trial by fire, with the goal of building a product and pitching it to the world's best investors. Reading one of Graham's essays, Martinez saw the application deadline for the next Y Combinator batch was in 2 days. A surge of manic energy took over. He, McEachin, and Zimnis spent the next 48 hours secretly hammering out an application, playing hooky from Adchemy to work at a nearby coffee shop. Their idea? Ambitious, maybe foolish. They wanted to build a tool letting small, local store owners instantly create online ad campaigns for products on their shelves. But as Martinez wisely notes, at this early stage, the idea barely matters. Early-stage investors, especially the smart ones at Y Combinator, care far more about the team than the idea. An idea without a brilliant team to execute it is worthless. Against all odds, their last-minute caffeine-fueled application worked. They got invited for an interview. The interview itself was a 10-minute blur of rapid-fire questions from 4 of tech's sharpest minds, including Paul Graham himself. They walked out feeling run over by a truck, convinced they'd failed miserably. But then, as they drowned their sorrows at a local beer bar, the phone rang. It was Paul Graham. "We'd like to fund you." They were in, they had their lifeboat. Now they just had to abandon the Adchemy shipwreck. And this is where the real drama begins. Quitting a startup, Martinez tells us, shouldn't be simple and polite. He says if the drama around your departure doesn't recall Cubans hijacking airliners to Miami, you should be less than thrilled about leaving. When Martinez, McEachin, and Zimnis walked into their CEO's office to resign, Martinez didn't wish them well. He launched into a tirade, telling them they weren't smart or tough enough to build a company, and that he'd personally ensure no venture capitalist ever gave them a dime. What followed was a week of intense harassment. The company tried picking them off one by one, exploiting individual weaknesses. They pressured McEachin, who had a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage, convincing him he was throwing away everything he'd built. They tried a different tactic with Argyris Zimnis, who wasn't a U.S. citizen and was in the country on a work visa sponsored by Achemy. This is a dark Silicon Valley secret. The American immigrant visa system, particularly the H-1B visa, can amount to modern indentured servitude. Your legal status is tied to your employer. If you quit, you can be forced to leave the country within days. Achemy's management knew this and weaponized it. They told Argyris that if he left, his visa would be canceled. In a particularly cruel twist, the 2 executives threatening him, Murthy Nukala and Chander Sarna, were themselves immigrants from India who'd once been in the same vulnerable position. The former slaves had become slave owners, cracking the visa whip. Argyris, to his immense credit, refused intimidation. He found a legal loophole by marrying his longtime girlfriend, who was a student, which let him stay in the country. When Achemy threatened to report him to immigration for supposedly working illegally, Argyris called their bluff, went into the office one last time, and told them to do their worst. That was the end of that. They were finally free. But as they'd soon discover, their old boss wasn't done yet. Their real battle was just beginning. They named their new company AdGrock and entered Y Combinator's intense 3-month pressure cooker. The climax of Y Combinator is Demo Day. Each startup gets just 2.5 minutes to pitch their company to a room packed with Silicon Valley's most powerful and elite venture capitalists. It's a single moment that can make or break a company. Martinez describes waiting for his turn as similar to the 10 minutes he once spent on a Pamplona cobblestone street, waiting for the bulls to be released. There is no God and no law. You're there at the risk of your life, or in this case, your company's life. AdGrock's pitch was a success. They came in second place in a rehearsal vote among their peers, just behind a company called Reportive. On real demo day, Martinez delivered a flawless, high-energy pitch. The moment he stepped off stage, the room erupted into what he calls a mosh pit of greed and glib persuasion, a swirling sea of young founders in branded T-shirts and rich investors in button-downs, all trading ambition for money. The fundraising race was on, and it was going well. They'd secured interest from some of the Valley's biggest names, including famous angel investor Chris Sacca, an early investor in Twitter and Uber. Things were looking up. And then the phone rang, the call that changed everything. Their lawyer was on the line. Achemy, their former employer, had officially filed a lawsuit. Martinez describes the list of charges: misappropriation of trade secrets, breach of contract, breach of the duty of loyalty. It was a legal kitchen sink, designed to bleed them dry and scare off investors. Murthy had timed his attack with exquisite sadism, striking at the peak of their fundraising momentum. Now it was all gone. Martinez's mind raced through worst-case scenarios. They had almost no money. McEachin, with his family, might be forced to quit. They could be personally bankrupted, their names ruined in the valley forever. Argyris might have to flee back to Greece. They were, in his words, well and truly screwed. But here, Martinez shares a crucial insight about conflict, especially in business. He quotes ancient military strategist Sun Tzu: "A wise combatant always allows his opponent a way out." By trying to completely destroy them, Murthy had made a serious mistake. He'd backed them into a corner, and men with nothing to lose, Martinez says, will stop at nothing to win. The AdGrock team now had to fight a war on 2 fronts. They had to raise money to survive, while simultaneously defending themselves in a lawsuit that made them look like corporate thieves. Every investor they spoke to had to be told about the lawsuit. Many bailed immediately. Those who stayed, like Russell Siegelman and Chris Sacca, demanded a lower valuation. Their company's price was cut in half overnight. But they still needed to pay the lawyers. And this is where we see the ruthless, Machiavellian brilliance that defines a chaos monkey. Martinez knew big companies have 2 weak points: their investors and their potential business partners. He decided to go after both. He needed to find Murthy's corporate weak spots and hold a knife to them. The first knife was Paul Graham and the power of the Y Combinator network. YC was the gatekeeper to the best new startups in the Valley, and Acheme's investors, powerful firms like August Capital and the Mayfield Fund, needed access to that deal flow to survive. When Martinez told Paul Graham about the lawsuit, Graham didn't hesitate. He went to war for them. He personally contacted Acheme's investors and essentially threatened to blacklist them, cutting them off from all future Y Combinator deals if they didn't get their portfolio company, Acheme, to back down. Suddenly, Murthy's own moneymen were yelling at him to stop being a jerk. The second knife was even more surgical. Martinez had heard a rumor that Acheme was negotiating a massive, company-saving deal with Microsoft. If that deal fell through, Acheme could collapse. Martinez needed a way to reach Microsoft and whisper that the company they were about to partner with was embroiled in ugly litigation. Through a connection, he reached a high-level Microsoft contact involved in the Acheme deal. That contact agreed to raise the issue. The message was delivered. Microsoft didn't want to get involved with a company in a legal mess. The trap was sprung. Acheme was now surrounded. On one side, their own investors were squeezing them. On the other, their biggest potential partner was threatening to walk away. And in the middle, Adgrok and their formidable lawyers from Fenwick and West were ready for a long, ugly public fight. Checkmate. Within weeks, Adgrok's tone completely changed. They offered to dismiss the lawsuit. The war was over. Adgrok had won. A tiny 3-person startup had gone up against a corporate giant and, through sheer grit and strategic cunning, came out on top. This victory should have been the start of their triumphant journey, but the battle had taken its toll. The team was exhausted. The pressure had created cracks in the co-founder relationship, and now they faced an even bigger challenge: the long, slow grind of actually building a business, a period Martinez calls the trough of despair. This is the valley of death where most startups that survive their initial battles go to die, when launch day excitement fades and the hard reality of finding paying customers sets in. It was in this vulnerable state that an unexpected offer appeared. An influential employee at rapidly growing Twitter had been a fan of Martinez's blog posts. Her name was Jessica Virilli, and she invited him to lunch. That lunch turned into another, this time with engineers on Twitter's nascent ads team. And in the middle of that lunch, one of the engineers, Kevin Wheel, looked at Martinez and said, "Maybe you should join us, like in acquiring you." The word acquisition hung in the air. For a struggling startup, it's the ultimate dream. But it's also a dangerous game, a high-stakes round of poker that Martinez calls acquisition chicken. He knew they couldn't just accept the first offer. They had to create an auction. A friend had given him advice he took to heart: if you want to seduce a beautiful woman, court her ugly sister. In this case, he needed other suitors. He immediately reached out to Facebook. Using a connection from his Y Combinator batch, he landed a meeting with their ads team. During the pitch, he dropped a carefully crafted bluff. When asked who else they were talking to, he hinted it was Google. This was brilliant. He knew the one company in the world that truly terrified Facebook was Google. The bait was taken. Facebook was in. What followed was a dizzying week of corporate espionage, back-channel negotiations, and psychological warfare. Twitter made a verbal offer of around $5 million. Martinez and his investors thought it was too low. He told Twitter they weren't interested. While stonewalling Twitter, he and his team went through a full day of grueling interviews at Facebook. And then came the twist. The call from Facebook came a few days later. The feedback on his co-founders McEachin and Zimnis was mixed. Facebook wasn't going to buy the company. Martinez's heart sank. But, the voice on the phone continued, "The feedback for you was different. We want you to come join the Facebook ads team." He faced an impossible choice. He could take the prestigious, lucrative job at Facebook, the fastest-growing company on the planet, but it would mean abandoning his team and killing the acquisition deal with Twitter, leaving his co-founders with nothing. Or he could stick with his team, hope the Twitter deal worked out, and walk away from the opportunity of a lifetime. Martinez knew what he had to do. He had to play both sides. He decided in that moment to deceive his co-founders for the first time. He told them Facebook had rejected everyone, including him. His rationale was that if they knew he had a guaranteed escape route, they might lose their nerve negotiating with Twitter. He needed them to believe the Twitter deal was do or die for everyone. With the Facebook offer secretly in his back pocket, he went back to Twitter and played hardball. The negotiations were intense. At a pivotal meeting, he dropped his bombshell. He told the Twitter team he wouldn't be joining them. He was going to another company, though he didn't say which one. The room went cold. The Twitter executives looked like they'd swallowed wasps. Martinez had just pulled the riskiest move of his life, potentially blowing up the entire deal. But his gamble paid off. An hour later, Twitter called back. They still wanted the company, even without him. They made an offer just over $5 million for his two co-founders and the technology. It was messy, chaotic, and morally ambiguous, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Adgrok saga was over. McEachin and Zimnis were heading to Twitter with a life-changing deal. And Antonio Garcia Martinez was walking into the belly of the beast, Facebook. The final part of Martinez's story is a fascinating and often damning look inside Facebook during its most critical period, the years leading up to and immediately following its massive IPO. He arrived at a company that was, in his words, a corporate religion. The onboarding process was less like new job orientation and more like indoctrination. Senior leaders like Chris Cox and Mark Zuckerberg himself would give rousing speeches, framing Facebook's mission not as a business, but as a historic quest to make the world more open and connected. The campus was plastered with propaganda-style posters with slogans like, "Move fast and break things," and "Fortune favors the bold." It was an intoxicating culture of militant engineering, all-consuming work identity, and almost apostolic devotion to a great cause. But Martinez, having just come from the trenches of his own startup, saw cracks in the facade. He was assigned to the ads team, the division responsible for making money, and what he found shocked him. The first thing he did was look at the company's revenue dashboards. The numbers were, in his words, utter dog crap. Facebook was making billions, but it wasn't because their advertising was smart. It was because, as he puts it, a billion times any number is still a big number. The company had so many users spending so many hours on the site that even tiny, ineffective ads, when shown billions of times, added up to a mountain of cash. Worse, he realized nobody on the ads team seemed to have any real advertising experience. They were brilliant engineers, but they were living in a bubble, completely disconnected from the outside world of ad technology. They were trying to reinvent the wheel without knowing what a wheel was. This cluelessness reached its peak with a company-wide bet on a product called Sponsored Stories. It was a complex, convoluted idea that was supposed to revolutionize advertising by making it social. The problem was, it didn't work. Advertisers weren't seeing results. But inside Facebook, it was treated as gospel. To question it was heresy. Martinez describes sitting in meetings where executives preached the magic of sponsored stories, even as the company's own internal research showed it was failing. It was classic cognitive dissonance. The company was so invested in believing the flying saucers were coming, they refused to accept the reality that the sky was empty. The wake-up call came just months before the IPO. Revenue growth was cratering. Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook's powerful COO, finally snapped in a high-level meeting, declaring that the strategy of selling likes to big brands was over. The company was desperate for a new way to make money. This crisis was Martinez's opportunity. He knew the outside world of advertising. He knew about a technology called real-time bidding, which was essentially a stock market for eyeballs, allowing advertisers to target users with surgical precision based on their recent browsing behavior. This was the future, but Facebook was completely blind to it. Martinez took it upon himself to become the internal champion for this new vision. He and a small, rogue team of 3 engineers, whom he nicknamed his Spartans, began a secret project to build a real-time ad exchange for Facebook. They called it Facebook Exchange, or FBX. In an almost unbelievable feat of engineering, they built the entire system in just 5 weeks. But building it was the easy part. Getting the company to support it was a brutal political war. The ad's leadership, particularly a product marketing director named Brian Boland, was heavily invested in their own internal closed solution called Custom Audiences. What followed was a year-long vicious debate that raged in emails and tense meetings in Sheryl Sandberg's conference room. It was the open vision of FBX versus the closed, walled garden vision of Custom Audiences, a battle for the future of Facebook's monetization. In the end, Martinez lost. The leadership, led by a powerful friend of Zuck named Andrew Bosworth, chose the closed path. The decision was made. FBX, the product he'd poured his soul into and gambled his career on, was to be sidelined, slowly starved of resources. 2 days after that final fatal meeting, Martinez was called into a conference room. A woman from HR was waiting for him. He was being fired. His time as a chaos monkey inside the Facebook machine was over. But the story has a final, ironic twist. While FBX was sidelined, it was never shut down. It was too profitable. In the months after Martinez left, its revenue exploded, hitting $500 million in new, incremental revenue for Facebook. It became one of the fastest-growing revenue products in the company's history, second only to the mobile newsfeed ads that would ultimately save the company's stock price. And what about Facebook's great nemesis, the threat that had consumed the company's attention for years? Google+, the product that had sparked Zuckerberg's "Carthage must be destroyed" war cry, fizzled out. Its leader, Vic Gundotra, left Google, and the product was dismantled. Facebook had won the war. Martinez's journey is a powerful reminder that in the world of technology, and perhaps in life, success is often a product of chaos, luck, and relentless, bloody-minded determination. The path is rarely a straight line. It's a winding, unpredictable road full of failure, betrayal, and moments of improbable victory. So what do we take away from this wild ride through the heart of modern capitalism? Antonio Garcia Martinez's Chaos Monkeys is more than just a collection of war stories. It's a profound and deeply insightful look at the nature of ambition, power, and the messy human reality behind the sleek, polished surfaces of the companies that run our world. The first and most powerful lesson is that the world, especially the world of business and innovation, is not neat and orderly. It's chaotic, unpredictable, and often deeply unfair. Martinez's title is perfect. Society is a data center, and entrepreneurs and engineers are the chaos monkeys, running around, pulling cables, and breaking things to see what happens. They thrive on disruption. But this story teaches us that disruption isn't just about technology. It's about people, politics, and power. Success isn't just about having the best idea or the best code. It's about your ability to navigate the human jungle, to persuade, to fight, to form alliances, and sometimes to be ruthless. Martinez shows us that the line between a visionary and a madman is often just a matter of timing and luck. The same obsessive, single-minded focus that leads to breakthrough innovation can also lead to spectacular flameouts. The key difference, he seems to suggest, is grit. It's the ability to take an endless amount of punishment, to get kicked in the face every morning, and come back for more the next day. That resilience, that courage never to submit or yield, is the entrepreneur's most valuable asset. Another striking theme is the immense gap between a company's public mythology and its internal reality. We see Facebook, a company that preaches a gospel of making the world more open and connected, engaging in brutal bare-knuckle political fights internally. We see a culture that claims to value the hacker who moves fast and breaks things, but ultimately punishes those who challenge the established order too forcefully. This isn't unique to Facebook. It's a fundamental truth about any large organization. As companies grow, the chaos monkeys who built them are often replaced by zookeepers, the managers and bureaucrats who prefer stability to disruption. Martinez's story is a cautionary tale for anyone who believes they can change a giant institution from the inside. So what can you, as a young, ambitious person, learn from this? First, understand the game you're playing. Whether you're in tech, finance, or any other competitive field, recognize that there are written rules and unwritten rules. The unwritten rules, about power, influence, and human psychology, are often more important. This book is a masterclass in those unwritten rules. Second, cultivate resilience. You will face setbacks. You will face unfairness. People will underestimate you and try to sabotage you. Your ability to get back up, learn from your failures, and keep fighting is what will ultimately determine your success. As Martinez learned in his fight with alchemy, sometimes the most powerful position is having your back against the wall with nothing left to lose. And finally, be honest with yourself about what you truly want. The world of Silicon Valley offers obscene fortune, but it often demands your entire life in return. Martinez ultimately walked away from it all to pursue a life of writing and sailing around the world. He reminds us that success isn't just about a stock price or a job title. It's about defining your own terms for a life well lived. That was a summary of Chaos Monkeys by Antonio Garcia Martinez. We've journeyed through the core narrative today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a great city. It shows you the layout, but it can't convey the energy, the sounds, the smells, and the feeling of walking its streets. The real power of this book is in Martinez's voice, his sharp wit, his brutal honesty, and his incredible talent for storytelling. If you've been captivated by the chaos, the ambition, and the high-stakes drama we've discussed, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just learning about Silicon Valley. It's experiencing it through the eyes of someone who lived in the eye of the storm. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable and want to explore more incredible books that have shaped the minds of the world's most successful people, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another world-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.